So, without further ado, welcome. I'm Emily, the founder of Untangle. And some of you will know we help families to rebuild life after loss. So, what that means in practice is we run support groups, events like these, we have information and a team to help you with any kind of practical or emotional questions that come up after bereavement. We're really delighted today to have Amanda with us. She's an expert in her field, innovative creative play. We were just discussing it. It's such an interesting route into supporting children. So her area of specialism is children who are suffering with emotional and psychological problems. She's a published author as well, actually moved from publishing to being a published author, and hosts a podcast, Helping Children Smile Again After Loss and Change. In her previous role as a Great Ormond Street Hospital ambassador, she gave talks to charities and corporates about the work and research that GOSH do, and their wonderful organisation. And she assisted GOSH in the early days of setting up their craft station. She's trained as a social worker and has worked with numerous local authorities to use therapeutic play with children and their families. And I'm really, really delighted that she's here tonight to lead this session. Just before we begin, if you have any questions throughout, feel free to just pop them in the chat, and I'll be fielding questions as they come up. And we'll also have time for Q&A at the end as well. So just the little chat icon, just write the questions in there. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Amanda.
Thank you, Emily, for that lovely introduction and for inviting me here this evening to share the space, still in the virtual world, to talk about how to support children through loss. You're right, I am a child psychotherapist, but I'm not a social worker. I've actually trained social workers. So just to make that clear, in case anyone is a social worker here tonight, yes, my main role is as a practicing psychotherapist. So talking and looking at loss can be quite scary, and I'm aware this evening I just want to reassure everybody that this is a safe space. So it's safe as in you can share or as much or as little as you like. My particular style of training and speaking is to involve people through using the play and the creativity. And we have a little exercise tonight that I'm going to ask you to do, just to give you a taster of what it's like as an adult to use a creative medium. For yourself, you will experience this. It's also something that you can use easily with children. And when I say children, I'm talking children from, say, the ages of 8 up to, you can up into adulthood. So it's an opportunity to really engage with the medium tonight, with me, plenty of time to sort of share if you'd like to, and ask questions at the end. If there's a question that you would like to ask before the end, then please put it in the chat and Emily will field that. Just to start, I'm always curious about where people are in the country. If you wouldn't mind putting it in the chat where you are located, I'm just always interested to know, as we're not gathered in one physical space, it's nice to know where people are in the outer world. So I'm going to start by reading a poem, which is called Bird Wings by the Sufi poet Rumi, and it's about grief, because when we're looking at loss, any kind of loss, whether it's the loss of someone who's died, whether it's loss of a home, whether it's loss through divorce, parents have separated, loss of a pet. There are all many different types of loss, and the pandemic has amplified a lot of those losses that were there before. But with loss comes grief and comes change, and we can't have loss without grief and without change. So this is a poem that really illustrates a lot of what we're going to be doing tonight. Bird Wings by Rumi. Your grief for what you've lost lifts a mirror up to where you're bravely working. Expecting the worst, you look, and instead, here is the joyful face you've been wanting to see. Your hand opens and closes, and opens and closes. If it were always a fist, or always stretched open, you would be paralyzed. Your deepest presence is in every small contracting and expanding, the two as beautifully balanced and coordinated as bird wings. The reason I like to start with that poem is because it's about balance. And I think when we're talking about loss and grief, it's always a balancing act between feeling overwhelmed and feeling that you're actually coping. And when we're working with children, we're learning to not only hold ourselves in the loss, but to hold the child as well. And the more we can do that and find our balance, the deeper our capacity is to understand and to learn from them what it is that they're actually trying to tell us. And it's all about learning what the child's story is about. The challenge is if our own grief gets in the way and we don't learn how to hold that ourselves, we again become unbalanced and the child will pick that up. So it's important to remember that when you are supporting children through loss, it's very likely that you will be also experiencing your own feelings of loss. Hence the analogy of finding balance. And creativity is a wonderful way in which to find that balance when words just simply aren't enough. And with children, we know that, and Emily and I were talking about this before we came into the room, that very often young children don't like to be confronted with someone asking them how they feel directly. It can be very challenging. It's actually sometimes very challenging for adults to be asked directly how they feel about something, especially when it's about something as poignant as loss. I'm just going to taste some water. So the way I've just got a few slides that I'd like to share with you to show you the skills that I think are important to learn when you are supporting children. Okay, can you see that clearly, Emily? Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So
we can see your whole screen.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just see the slides, or can you see anything else?
We can see the back, your whole computer screen.
Oh right, okay. Let me just
very fun illustration in the background.
Let me just see if I can block that out so it's not quite as distracting. So nice. Okay. That's an illustration from one of my books, actually. Okay, so I think there are 4 essential skills to learn when you're supporting grieving children. And these are all interconnected, so they don't happen in isolation, but they start with listening. So the first step really is to listen, to learn to listen. And you're listening to 2 things. You're listening to the behavior that you see, and you're listening to the language that's used. And very often with children in the age group of, say, as young as 3, really, right up until 8 or 9, it's the behavior that will alert you to the distress that the child is feeling. So it might be a behavior that's different from, say, a normal pattern, a regular pattern of behavior. So you may find there's sleep disruption, there's an eating disruption, there is a greater need to be close to you, there might be clinginess, separation anxiety, you know, when you're taking child to school, or you're picking them up from a play date, or you're taking them to a friend's house. The prospect of separating from you may arouse within the child anxiety, and that may become very noticeable. So listening to the behavior and recognizing that the behavior is really a call for help is the first thing. The second skill is to reflect back what you see, what you hear, and what you feel. And that reflection helps the child feel heard and supported. So if you can imagine that you're noticing, you're listening, you're noticing the child's not sleeping very well, a reflective response would be to make it clear, to say, I notice that you're struggling to go to sleep at night. And I'm wondering, you know, why that might be. Is you start a conversation that way by noticing and reflecting back what you're seeing, what you're hearing, and what you're feeling. So you're not asking a direct question, which can be quite confronting for a child. You're not saying, so I'm you know, how do you feel about granddad dying? That's very direct. You might notice that the child's very upset. And the third skill is to play, is to make stories with your child, is to actually set aside what I call pockets of playtime during the day or in the evening. It can be 15 minutes. It doesn't have to be a long period of time. But what's interesting is that dedicated time is going to give the message to your child that you are alongside them, that you are actually building that bond and strengthening that sense of connection that they may be missing because of the loss. So what happens with loss is that it brings up this tremendous anxiety around absence, around separation. So playing and actually creating something together creates and strengthens that bond. So have a little crate or a box of playthings, of crayons and some paper, always handy, always in your house, where you can actually set aside that time to play. And the fourth thing is so important. And I see this a lot with parents, clients, parents who are really struggling with burnout. And it's because it's become so difficult to care for their own needs in the relationship. Maybe the loss is so overwhelming and the focus is on the child that actually then the attention gets drawn away from them, and we get this imbalance again. So it becomes all about the child, and then your own needs suffer. But what needs to happen is you need to put some time into caring for yourself and your own needs so that you get this balance back again. Otherwise, it will continue to be very, very wobbly. And the tool you're going to use tonight is one that you can actually use yourself every day. It's so easy to use. So
can I ask a question on that? So, you know, there might be points when the child's need feels more acute than yours. How do you kind of balance that prioritization of, you know, that I've got an empty cup, but also I can tell that my child really needs me?
I think you can make it clear, and it's really important, actually. It's a really great question. I think if you give children the impression that you don't have needs, they grow up feeling that you are constantly going to be available for them. So introducing them to the idea that you also need to take a break, you know, that mummy needs time to have a cup of tea, to read a book, to sort of put feet up, that kind of thing, is a good lesson. It's a good lesson for children to learn. There's nothing wrong with saying, I'm going to play with you 15 minutes, and then I'm also going to sit down and have a break. So that, again, you're giving them permission to get comfortable with that absence, so that when losses do occur, it sort of softens the blow a bit, because they're used to relying as well on their own resources, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question, Emily?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Yeah. So when we look at loss, the impact of loss on children, you know, obviously over the last 18 months, they've really had a lot more than perhaps they would normally have had in the developmental cycle of their life. And what's happened is, when they've not been at school, the attachment that they would have had to people like teachers and teaching assistants and children, their friends at school, it's created again a feeling of loss. So when you're supporting a grieving child, it's always important to remember that what you're really doing is strengthening the bond. If you only do that, then you're actually supporting them in a very fundamental way. So just to look briefly at how grief affects different age groups in children. Children have a very strong awareness of loss from a very early age, right from birth, in fact. So the moment they start to separate from their caregiver, they are aware of loss. And you'll notice, you know, when a baby cries, when, you know, the mother steps away or the father steps away, that's because they are noticing that bond that's you know, becoming less intense because the person's the caregiver is moving away. That's separation awareness, and that's when the anxiety can start to creep in if the bond isn't continually repaired. Between 2 and 5, we get something called magical thinking, which is where children believe that they're responsible for people leaving and for people dying. So they tend to have thoughts like, well, if only I'd been more well behaved, maybe daddy wouldn't have died. They believe it's within their own power to bring that person back, or that they could actually make things turn out differently. So there's a lot of fantasy around at this time, at this age, of this age group. Then 6 to 12, children are very interested in metaphors, superheroes, you know, the idea that they can project all their needs and stories onto somebody else. And that's why when you're reading a book to a child of this age that is about animals, or not about, you know, it could be all sorts of different characters, it's a metaphor for how they feel, they can get very involved in the story. And then teenagers will respond to a more direct approach. You can actually have conversations with them, whereas with a younger age group, it's really all about play. It's really all about using play. Their natural language is play. They're going to respond to you more if you play with them than if you actually try and talk to them directly. So play and creativity is so important, because it's a bridge between the child's internal world and their relationship with us. So rather than using direct language, if you have some crayons or you have some sand, that's going to be the medium that's going to open up the communication between you and your child more easily than if you sit them down and say, right, okay, now I think I want to have a chat with you about X, Y, and Z. That's going to be very confronting. So play is their natural language. It also helps to build their own resilience. So it's really important. In the play therapy toolkit, and I would suggest having some of these things at home, again in a box: painting and drawing, therapeutic story, games and role play, masks and puppets, musical instruments, movement and dance and sound. So you can see there's a whole variety of things. You could add crafting into that as well: sticking and gluing, cutting pieces of paper up, making things out of paper and string. It's really a way to build a relationship between you and the child. So I'd like to invite you to do a little exercise with me, and I'm hoping that has everyone got some crayons and paper to hand? Perhaps you could put that in the chat box if you have. Has everyone got crayons and paper? Or a pen, maybe you can use. Maybe you could grab a piece of paper, pen. Normally I would do this exercise with crayons, coloured crayons. If you haven't got coloured crayons, it doesn't matter. Just use a pen or a pencil for now. It'll just give you an idea of the type of exercise that you can use with crayons or felt tip pens, if that's easier to use. Okay. So the way this is going to work, I'm going to read a little story, which is the kind of story I would recommend you read to a child of the age, say, between 8 and 13. And when I've finished reading the story, it's only a few minutes, I'd like you to draw an image on your paper, an image that represents how you feel having heard the story. So what feelings does this evoke within you? And it doesn't have to be anything. We're not looking for great art here. Don't worry about that. It's really just a representation of how you feel. So it can be anything. And then we'll talk about what that process was like for you all. Okay. So the story is actually called Hemi and the Whale. Okay. Once upon a time, there was a small boy called Hemi who lived near the sea. And every morning, Hemi woke up early, jumped out of bed, and was excited to go downstairs to the seashore and to explore and look out at the sea. Every day there was something different for Hemi to look at. It was always changing, and the sea was always different, and he loved that about it. And one morning, there was something very different on the beach, very different and very large, and it made Hemi's heart flip over because it was a whale. And there it was, lying on the sand, very, very still, wasn't moving. Hemi ran over to look at the whale, thinking that it was dead, but he saw that the blowhole was opening and closing, and he realized that the whale was still breathing. So he ran back up to the house to call his grandmother. "Granny, Granny, get water quick. There's a whale on the beach." He ran and got buckets and started filling them with water, but they were very heavy, and it took all his strength not to spill the water on the way. Meanwhile, his grandmother, looking out the window, saw what was happening and called his grandfather. And his grandfather called the neighbor, and the neighbor calls another neighbor, And that neighbor called a friend, and suddenly there was a whole group of people running up and down the beach, carrying buckets of water, trying to keep the whale wet until the incoming tide could float it back out to sea again. Someone brought bed sheets to cover the whale to help keep its skin really moist. Finally, the tide came in and began to wash up against this mighty animal. And Hemi was standing right by its head when it opened one unblinking black liquid eye. "Hold on, whale," said Hemi. "You will soon be home." Then everyone worked together to support the whale. Some pulled on the sheets to steer the beast, and others pushed from behind, struggling in the foamy water and the wet sand. Finally, they felt the life coming back into the whale. Its body shuddered and shook, and it took one massive breath through its blowhole and then blew out again. It nosed down into the sea and slipped off the sheets, and a big cheer went up as it flicked its tail and began to swim back out to sea. Hemi stayed on the seashore long after everyone else had gone, watching the waves and scanning the horizon for his whale. Finally, his grandmother came down and put her arm around him. And she said, "I'm really proud of you, Hemi." And then they slowly walked back to the house together, arm in arm. Okay, so that's the end of the story. So what I'd like you to do quickly, I'll give you a few minutes to do this, is to draw an image on your paper of how you feel right now. Don't think about it too much. Just draw the first image that comes into your mind. Try and stay with the feelings that you have and don't analyze them too much. Just keep drawing. Just a couple more minutes. Okay, so when you've finished your drawing, I'd like you to write down one word next to your drawing, one word that sums up your feeling, your drawing. You may notice that writing down one word, you start to then have other thoughts about the drawing. That's key. You know the process is working then. So make a note as well of the other thoughts that start to follow on from having written down that first word. Maybe a sentence, it may be a phrase. Keep writing down whatever comes into your mind. And then this is a piece of reflection now for you to do. Reflect on what you've drawn and what you've written and ask yourself, does this in any way relate to either a question you've been asking yourself recently or a circumstance that you find yourself in? Can you relate this to where you are now in your life? Situation that may be troubling you or you're finding challenging. Are there any clues in the drawing and in the writing that are helpful to you? Do they offer any insight that might be helpful? Are there any sort of aha moments there where you can say, oh, that's, I didn't know that. That's really interesting. That's helpful. Because what you're doing here is you're dialoguing with yourself. So you're working with the more rational, the left-hand side of your brain, and you're actually working with the right, more emotional, creative side of your brain. You're starting to link them up. So if you notice that you're thinking analytically about it and you're starting to sort of hit a roadblock and struggle with that, go back to the drawing and keep looking at the drawing. Stay with the feelings that come through the drawing. Maybe there's something else there that you've missed. Maybe it's a little bit hidden. Might take a while to see it. That's quite a natural part of this process. Not everything is automatically clear. It does take a little bit, it does take time. So you can come back to this drawing, look at it over the next couple of days and see what that dialogue does over the next couple of days. Do you find that other thoughts start to arise from it? I'm very aware that quite a few people have got their cameras off, so you may feel you want to put them on for this or not, that's fine. But is there anyone who'd like to perhaps say something about what it was like to do this exercise? Was it helpful? Have you done something like this before? Or if not, maybe it's the first time for doing something like this. Emily, have you ever done anything like this before?
No, I haven't. And I found it quite difficult at first because I found myself drawing, a whale on a bead, and then actually started drawing what I was feeling a bit more. And it's actually there was a beach element to it, but it's actually much more abstract. And then, yeah, it was interesting then analysing it afterwards. And what I originally thought was coming through, I think was actually very different from what actually is coming through. And it kind of actually surprised me, to be honest. I guess it's difficult because you're kind of projecting meaning onto it, but then the meaning you project is the meaning that is present. It's something that's present in my mind. So the fact that I've kind of come up with certain things surprised me, but in a good way. I feel it feels good kind of discovering something that's obviously sitting, behind the busy work day and everything else that's going on in life. So yeah, I think it was a really helpful exercise.
I think that's a really good point, that a lot of it was sitting behind a busy day and a busy mind probably as well. I think we all have that, which is, this exercise can be done at any time, and you can do an abbreviated version of it with a child, but the more you do it, the more you'll start to feel the dialogue becoming clearer and clearer and clearer. And it helps to just put the thoughts down onto paper. So something about putting it onto paper, it's not so worrying if you see it on paper. Whereas if you're carrying it around with you, it can start to feel quite overwhelming eventually. And it's true, very often the first image is the obvious one, but then there's always a less obvious purpose to that. So yeah, it sounds like you really got it.
What do you recommend using? Can it be any story, or do you recommend, obviously there's your books, but are there any other kind of stories? Is there a particular type of story you'd recommend?
Yes, I mean, there's a book called Badger's Parting Gifts, which is a little picture book for children who've suffered a bereavement. And reading a story like that can be a great way to set up a conversation with a child. So you could sit down together, get cozy, read the story, and then invite the child to actually draw a picture of how they feel, or their response. Even, would you like to draw something after listening to that story? It's very likely that they will, and that you as the adult will then get a lot of information about how they're feeling. And that's where the listening comes in, and then the reflection, and you can learn a lot about what's actually in a child's mind from doing that. So it doesn't have to be a as long as that, you know, the Hemi and the Whale is you know, it's a page and a half. But yeah, any colourful picture book that has plenty of pictures and colour in it is really what you want to be looking for with a young child. Not too much text, lots of pictures, so that there are things for them to talk about and for you to point out to them. You can talk about what's going on in the picture, and that in itself will be a conversation starter.
Whilst we were doing this, I was also thinking about sometimes, you know, when I'm on the phone or things, I'm doodling away. Is that, you know, is it worth like looking at your doodles and kind of reflecting, or is that completely
no, I think it is worth doing that. In fact, I keep a little crayon book by the side of my bed with crayons, because if I'm processing something or if I'm feeling anxious, I've noticed that if I just grab that and doodle on it, that releases some of the tension that I'm feeling, that I might not be able to find the words for. I'm not quite sure what it's about, but I'm aware that something is cooking. The act of actually just drawing something, as we've just done, you know, as you've just done, it can release that tension, and then it just comes. I go, oh, that's what it is. Okay, I'm stressing about X. And the more you do it, it's like a muscle. It will become easier over time. Yeah, so doodling is a great stress reliever, I think. Yeah. Is anyone else? I don't want to pick on anybody. I can only see two people. I can see Mandy and Joanna, I think. How did you find the exercise, Mandy? Did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I actually draw quite a lot because I do have like quite a creative background. Like I've done like a degree and stuff with art, so I draw quite a lot. Following bereavement, I really stopped. Like I found I was just blocked, couldn't do it at all, and then I started again recently. But the one thing I've never done when I've been drawing, I mean, you wouldn't know that I've done a degree based on this particular drawing. I've never actually journaled any thoughts after it, or thought about why I've drawn it. Like some of the things I've drawn are really dark, but I've never actually put a word to any of them, and I've found it really useful for myself, and I think I will find it really useful again, like to do that with my children. My children are really young, they're only 3 and 2. Well, my daughter's nearly 4, but she's very intelligent. Like she's got a much higher IQ than most 4-year-olds, so I think she will really be able to communicate with me by doing that. Obviously my 2-year-old won't, but I think she'll join in, which will be useful as well. So yeah, I found it really good.
Brilliant. Yeah, and it's something you could do with your children as well.
Yeah,
you could do it together.
I put this actual picture up in my kitchen where we usually do our drawings and stuff, just because then I know she'll see it and maybe ask to do something similar. So I think that'd be a good idea.
Yeah. Oh, that's great to hear. Yeah, the words really do bring it all together, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Joanna, I can see your lovely face too. Is there anything you'd like to say?
Just, I don't know if I've got too much out of it, really. My children are older, they're 13 and 19. And I mean, it was just, I don't know. It was just, you know, I got, you know, that they was happy, then a bit sad because they've gone, sadness, loss. Then I wrote at the end, the strong one, I'm the strong one. I don't really know. I suppose really I feel that my two, I've got 2 boys, that they're just getting on with things. I've got one just gone to university, and there's a part of me that would like them to show more emotion, and I'll speak all the time and I show emotion, but they don't, you know. So, and I think to myself, is that wrong? But people just deal with their grief. I mean, I speak about feelings all the time, and you know, I just don't know really. I just think to myself, oh, I think the youngest one of 12, I think maybe as he gets older, he'll look back at other 12-year-olds and he'll think, God, I was only that age when my dad died, you know. And that, you know, and then the 19-year-old, the only time he really broke and cried was when we went in the intensive care, and he got, you know, this was in January, and then after that, he's just sort of soldiered on. I've noticed the younger one has seemed that he's got quite grown up, really.
Yeah. I think that I recognise that tendency to withdraw and hold it in. It doesn't mean the feelings aren't there. It just means that they're sort of finding it difficult to let them out. And even with teenagers of that age, something like drawing or painting can give them permission to do that. You know, because it's not necessarily you saying, how do you feel? It's actually the distraction is in the drawing itself. And that can then, you know, it then becomes about the drawing, less about the relationship in a way. But everyone's got their own time for it, haven't they? And you can't rush it. Yeah,
that's what I think. I think, you know, they know they can say anything. You know, and the son that he's been at university for 2 weeks, and I just think that he's been a bit poorly the past few days. And I said to him, do you want me to come and get you? I said, are you feeling down? Because I thought, you know, that, you know, he may being away from home and all that. And he said, no, he's okay and all that. And I just think they're just sort of getting on with things much better than what I am. You know?
Yeah. Was it your husband? Did you say your husband? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
It's very strange.
I'm sure.
Say the least.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes. And sometimes I think that people need that time, don't they? Away to get used to it. Yes. I'm so sorry. Yeah.
It's grief. Strange, a strange thing. I'll keep on doing so much reading on it and whatever. It's just, you know, it's just the most weirdest thing in the world.
There is a book by an author called Juliet Rosenfeld, I think her name is. Her husband died not suddenly, but he had an illness. And she writes beautifully about grief and what it's like to lose a husband. I'm sorry, I can't remember the title, but it's Juliet Rosenfeld. Yes.
Okay.
I'll send it to Emily and then.
Okay. Thanks.
Yes. Yeah. Sometimes it's helpful to read other people's experiences.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing at the minute. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Amanda, when Joanna was talking about kind of your boys being a bit older, other than drawing and kind of painting, are there any other activities that, like, types of play that you'd recommend that maybe?
Yes. Actually, crafting is very cathartic. So making things like a memory jar, keeping a memory jar, keeping also a jar where you can actually write your thoughts. If you don't want to share them, Joanna, might be quite nice too. You keep a sort of box or a jar, container, where you just literally write little notes to yourself and pop them in. You can do it with gratitude as well. So it's a way of just containing things without necessarily telling anybody about it. Another little exercises to make memory bracelets, to actually have pipe cleaners and tissue paper, and you get the child to actually make the bracelet in memory of someone who's died, and they either wear it themselves or they give it to you to wear, but the act of actually sitting together and making it is lovely. I've done that a lot with children who are grieving. Yeah. And scrapbooks, you know, getting old photographs out and making a scrapbook together. Again, giving the children a selection of tissue paper and glue and coloured crayons and letting them make their own memory books. That's also, but you have to give them complete freedom to actually make it as they want to make it. And then use that as a way to tell stories, to talk about the person who's died.
We do speak about him all the time. We speak about him, you know, like on the drive to school, for instance, this morning, my husband was Irish, he was a bit crazy, and there's one road we go down, there's all big boulders at the end of the houses, and I said Dad used to do his tyres on these all the time, and you know, Jack was laughing and said, "Yeah." I said he was one of those that caused accidents. I said he didn't realise that, and you know, things would go on behind. So I talk about him all the time, because I think, you know, and I talk about him in a laughing way and all that, because I think that is just, if in case, you know, to leave it the channel open in a way so they can talk.
Yeah, absolutely.
You
that
know?
sounds great. Really, really good. Yeah.
Mm.
It sounds like you've got a really good channel of communication.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, but it's just the emotions and it, but you know, the grief of it all. That, and I'm okay with that. It's just the night time, the emptiness of the night.
Right.
And it was good what you said earlier when you said like children picking up on things, and I try and work on that, because I realise that. I realise that they can pick up on them yucky feelings that you have inside, even if you're not saying it.
Yeah.
And I don't want that. Thanks.
So I think, as I say, this exercise is something, an abbreviation of this for you to do without children would be, you don't necessarily have to read a story to yourself, but to actually draw how you feel. So Joanna, if you've got that yucky feeling in the middle of the night and you're thinking, God, I just can't sleep, or it's, you know, your mind's racing, grab a piece of paper and draw something, and then put it away and try and go to sleep. And in the morning, when you wake up, look at the picture and see what words actually come to mind. And do it for a week. Try and do it every day for a week, in the morning, and again at night if you find it difficult to sleep, and just see how you feel at the end of the week. I'm not saying it's not a prescription for the feelings to go away. It's just a way for them to start to feel a little bit more manageable. And if it's helpful, you can just continue to do it. I mean, I do it all the time, and it's, you know, it's like brushing my teeth. It's I call it the check-in. You know, it is a way of checking in with yourself. And what you were saying about you having your own feelings and your sons have got theirs, and very often you can bump into each other. This is a way for you to put your feet up and have your nurture time, so that you don't have to hide it. If that makes sense. Yeah. So remember to listen to yourself, reflect on your own feelings as well, and make time to play. This is playing, this is playtime. It's really important to stay connected to that creative inner self as well. And make the time if you can.
Thank you so much, Amanda. I think they're great things to take away, that reminder to both play and make the times for ourselves. So thank you. And thanks for that. I think that was a really wonderful mix of theory at the beginning and understanding that model, and then also actually having the practical tools to put it into action. So thank you for covering both of those as well. It's been really, really interesting. Really, I don't know if enjoyable is the right word, but I'm going to use it. Enjoyable session. And thank you. Really appreciate you coming and sharing with us this evening. The recording of this will be, message me afterwards if anyone has questions about the recording, but we're going to upload it on the Untangle website, the logged in bit of the website, so it won't be publicly accessible. But and thank you so much, everyone.
Oh, can I just say that someone has very kindly put in the chat box the title of the book I mentioned, The State of Disbelief, A Story of Death, Love and Forgetting, by Juliet Rosenfeld. Thank you for doing that.
And there's also a children's book, Mum's Jumper, by Jade Perkin.
That is lovely.
Yeah. And of course, I was going to say, and of course your books as well.
Yeah, my books are, so there's Isaac and the Red Jumper, which is a picture book for young bereaved children, and Helping Children Cope with Loss and Change, which is a guide for parents and professionals and has a number of stories in it for young children, and they're both available. You can look at them both on my website, which is amandaseyderhelm.com, and they're available as well online.
And I'll post those. I'll post all of these, your books and these in the Untangle forum, so that everyone can follow up.
Thank you. It's been good.
Thank you. It's been, it's really.
No, because I do sort of bits of writing, but really what you've said to me is great about doing the drawings. I'm going to start doing that.
Oh, brilliant. Yes.
Because I write how I feel, but I'm going to do drawings now.
Yeah. I think you'll notice what Emily was saying about when you do the drawings, you start to notice the things that are a little bit further back.
They might be very dark.
But that's okay, because they're your thoughts. They're your thoughts. Yes.
Better out than in, as they say, right?
Yes. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Emily, for inviting me. It's been really lovely. Yeah, and I always wish I could come on and talk about, something that's light-hearted, like hot air ballooning or surfing or something, and everyone go, woohoo, want to try that. But grief is not like that, is it? It's messy and complicated and
nutty.
Yeah. And it's a big part of life as well.
Yes.
It is life.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Pleasure.
Thank you so much, Amanda, and thank you, everyone. It's been really wonderful.
It has. Thanks for coming.
I will share all of these books on our website and the recording as well. So really appreciate you giving that talk. I'm going to go and doodle as well, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Have a nice evening, everyone.
Bye.
Bye for now. Bye.